we could include tasks which help students develop maybe all three aspects of that EAT framework.
I think that's definitely, I feel like our approach has changed over the past year because of that. I don't think I used to focus on mapping out the assessment landscape as much as I do now.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think that that was a really, really helpful framework. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so I'm at Durham, and our in-sessional context is that we're a very small team, and so we can't necessarily be embedded for very long in a department. And so we might teach a few sessions or maybe one-off session, but we try to make it at least 2 or 3 with the same cohort, but sometimes it depends. And so I was just thinking about my context, and I think I would have to probably pick and choose different parts of the framework to look at, but also be very much in conversation with the academics to kind of see what they think the students' needs are. And because otherwise, if I only have one workshop with students, I wouldn't be able to cover everything. And one of the things we were talking about in our breakout room was that I think it depends upon the academics or the department you're working with as far as how well aligned their assessments are as well. So we thought that what you guys were showing with like the assessment, the alignment of the different assessments and making students aware of those, that's, I think, really helpful. But at the same time, they may not be very well aligned, right? So I was just kind of wondering about whether you as well are starting to kind of work with academics to improve those things. I think you mentioned that, but it kind of makes me think that as EAP practitioners, we might start moving more into that space of supporting academics with pedagogy and constructive alignment using this kind of framework. So those were like a lot of different things, but some of the reflections I had from what you guys shared.
Yeah, Deb, do you want to answer that? Because I think you mentioned
that definitely resonates. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. So the example I gave, I think, was to do with AI and robotics students. So initially, the lecturers wanted us to basically tell students they don't have to use AI. But the reality was that the assessment itself was not very AI resilient because students had to write, I think, like 12 critical summaries. They looked pretty much like abstracts. You know, you could have just copied and pasted abstracts from the articles. So that was their approach last year. And then usually we meet with contacts over the summer to discuss the provision for the following year. And before that meeting, I looked at high scoring and low scoring samples. And what I noticed that there was no evidence of really learning with high scoring samples. The only difference was that the low scoring sample, the language wasn't great, you know. But content-wise, there was no criticality because, again, how can, you know, it was just a summary. So then we actually talked to the lecturer, and now they're using the remind me the framework, Katrina, what I know.
The KWL. I mean,
yes, sorry, yeah, the KWL approach to what I know, what I want to know. So it's more like a reflective, a reflective assessment. So I think, yeah, I think you're very right that we do need to, especially considering the current climate around EAP. So we do need to prove that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, using frameworks like this, which I guess it relates a little bit more to learning development or academic development. So obviously it's not a specific EAP framework, but maybe it's a bit more of a shared language between EAP and some of the academics we work with, because some of them recognize it. And I think the first time I came across the EAT framework was when I was working part-time in academic development. So working for the sort of Centre for Teaching and Learning. And so they were using it in some of the HEA workshops with academics. And then it sort of resonated with me, and I realized, well, that's a lot of what we do is helping to make some of these assessment and feedback processes more transparent to students anyway in our EAP workshops. So that's why we sort of decided to look into it further. Do you mind if I quickly share my screen? Actually, something you just said, Jess, reminded me of in the EAT, I call it EAT document that we shared on the Padlet. I would just draw your attention to this page. Hopefully you can see it here near the end of the document, actually. This is the student-facing framework with the questions that students can ask to basically self-assess themselves against these almost like sub-dimensions of the three main areas of the EAT framework. And again, I think I haven't used this with students, but I use it for myself when I'm designing some of our workshops to check, or well, actually, no, that's not true. We do use some of these questions. So we would ask students, obviously, some of these questions in the materials, but it sort of helps me to break down the framework further. There is a tutor version too. Now, again, I haven't used it with the lecturers that we work with, but I think it could be, suggested. That, and I think some departments do actually look at this and check, how aligned their assessments are, whether they are promoting, meaningful dialogue, and whether they are making expectations clear. But anyway, I just thought I'd draw your attention to that bit because I think that's the most useful bit for me.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Hi, I think we've got a raised hand or two. We've not got a great deal of time, but yeah, Cansti, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, your hand is raised.
Oh yeah, it's Kimberly.
Hi.
It took me a minute to recognize that. I was just wondering, you mentioned having conversations about how aligned assessments are with faculty, staff, etc. Do you find those conversations really tricky? How do you approach it and structure them? Because in my context, some staff are really engaged and other staff are like, go away sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the same. I'd say I have had similar experiences. I'll let Deb talk in a minute, but yeah, I think we often work quite closely with unit directors because we're embedded in particular units. So it's not always easy to get that programmatic view, and we definitely look at handbooks quite a lot. So we would go onto Blackboard sites, we'd find the unit handbooks, we'd also look at the program ILOs. So we're almost trying to do that almost like ethnographic research ourselves. Conversations do obviously help, but it's not always easy to find the time or the willingness. But Deb, I mean, I think we have started to collaborate more closely, I'd say, this year with unit and program directors. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think so. And I do find, I mean, I haven't had many of those conversations, but they are very tricky because essentially you're criticizing their work. But then it turns out that, it was a different unit director who designed that assessment. So, but I guess, I don't know, in that particular meeting, I think because I'd looked at the sample analysis, and I feel like that's our specialism, right? I felt like I could justify why I thought the assessment was not that aligned. There's another aspect of this conversation that I find a bit challenging, and I don't know if you also have experienced this, but often when you talk to lecturers, they think the language is one thing and content is another thing, and you're there saying, well, it's not just language doesn't come out of nowhere. So I think it does take time to to develop that really.
It's beautiful when you have a lecturer who gets it. I had one exercise medicine, and I go into her induction and she says, I teach you the content. She teaches you how to communicate that content. You need both in order to succeed.
Yeah.
I thought,
and it's brilliant. And actually, one thing we've just started doing with the UG economics students is to co-teach with their lecturers. It's fairly new this year, isn't it? And I really enjoyed that. And actually, we got quite positive feedback because they could then see what we would bring to the session, and we would be the experts with language and structure, and then we could sort of co-teach together. It was great. I think it does help when they come and either observe the sessions too. I think then it's easier to have those conversations afterwards because they actually do understand what we do.
It's good to know that you're sort of doing what we're doing and collecting as much data as you can before you ever talk to, because they're so busy that they're likely to tell you to go away anyway. But
if I could just jump in very swiftly to say, firstly, thank you very much indeed to Katrina and Deb. Katrina, could you just de-share? Because I'd love to just.
Sorry.
In literally 30 seconds. That's no problem. No problem. I'll just ping up our final slides from the committee, in-session committee. So just to say thank you for attending. If that's coming through, yes, it is. There's a feedback form which I think might be arriving in the chat from one of the committee members. We do have an event coming up in just over a month, which is our final event of the year, Crackers and Chat. There's the title for it. We'll have some communication coming out. Everybody, of course, is welcome to propose an event. There's the link how to do that if it's in-sessional related, and those are our contact details. Great, there's the admin done. I'll stop recording. Great, thanks to all. And I'm not myself going anywhere, so having interjected just for time reasons, people are more than welcome if they'd like to hang around for a while. And with that in mind, Katrina, Deb, anyone else, please just carry on from where you were when I stepped in a moment ago, if you would like to. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, if anyone else wants, I mean, I don't have to